Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum at the Institute of Politics. My name is Jack Silvers. I'm a sophomore at the college. I'm a member of the Student Forum Committee. Before we begin, please take a moment to note the exit doors on the Park Street side and the JFK Street side. And also, please take a moment now to silence all of your cell phones. Once you've done that, please join me in a warm welcome for the co-chair of the Student Forum Committee, Ryan Tierney.
All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum at the Institute of Politics. As Jack said, my name is Ryan Tierney. I'm a junior at the college studying history, literature, and economics. I'm also one of the co-chairs of the Student Forum Committee for the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. Over the past decade, our nation's political discourse has grown not only increasingly combative, but also increasingly federal focusing. Scandals in the House, the Senate, and the White House are commonplace, attract public attention, and seem to, more than ever, hinder legislative progress. But despite this drama on the national stage, many public servants in local and state governments have maintained their composure and continue to work toward practical policy solutions. It is in appreciation of this professional service that we are honored to be joined by Chris Sununu, the 82nd Governor of New Hampshire. An MIT graduate, Governor Sununu began his career as an environmental engineer. Later, he served 6 years in the New Hampshire Executive Council and worked as the CEO of Waterville Valley Ski Resort before running for and winning his first election to the governorship. Since then, he's delivered 3 balanced state budgets, implemented nationally acclaimed addiction and recovery programs, and expanded investments in New Hampshire public schools. His work has been wildly popular. In 2020, he received more votes than any gubernatorial candidate in state history. And under his leadership, New Hampshire has also been ranked the #1 state in personal freedoms by the Cato Institute. We are also honored to be joined by our 2 moderators, Abby Carr and Seti Warren. Abby Carr is a sophomore at Harvard College, concentrating in government with a specialization in political theory. Outside of classes, she's the co-chair of the Institute of Politics Conservative Coalition, which under her leadership has been integral in improving ideological diversity on campus. As her teammate, I can also attest that she's an excellent swimmer, an Ivy League champion, and 2-time Olympic trials qualifier. Seti Warren is the interim director of the Institute of Politics. Over his career, he has served in a variety of public service roles, including as a special assistant in the White House Office of Cabinet Affairs during the Clinton administration, the New England Director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, Deputy State Director for Senator John Kerry, a Naval Intelligence Specialist, and Mayor of Newton, Massachusetts from 2010 to 2018. Thank you all very much for joining us, and we hope you enjoy this evening's discussion.
Well, it's great to welcome 2 governors to the forum this evening. Current Governor Sununu and previous Governor Sununu. Great to have you both here. We're going to get started. Abby.
Governor, we are so
just
grateful.
Thinking of the fact that I had to bring my dad. Just like that kind of hits you. You're like, oh, I went to the Kennedy School and I had to bring my dad to figure it out.
Governor, you are now in your 4th term as
Yes.
governor, and you chose to remain in the governor's mansion despite public pressure to run for the Senate. How would you characterize your particular governance style, and which governors of either party align with the way you approach the job?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, first thing, I don't have a governor's mansion like Massachusetts. I live in the big White House at the end of Hemlock Court for the last 20 years, which is, and I bring that up because that's the approach, right? New Hampshire is so fundamentally different than any other state because we talk about accessibility, right? There's complete accessibility, 400 representatives that represent 1.4 million people, that each get paid $100 a year, 24 state senators, that we all have to get elected every 2 years. Or as I like to put it, if we don't do our jobs, we will all be fired every 2 years, right? So the system really works. But that accessibility, I don't have massive staff. I have one of the smallest gubernatorial staffs. I don't have massive entourages we walk with. And literally, please don't do this, but if you really wanted to, you could come and knock on my door, and on my front door. And so the accessibility to government is really what is part of our secret sauce in New Hampshire, and so that's really at the heart of the approach and being successful. I've had Republican legislatures, I've had Democrat legislators, run legislatures. We always get stuff done. We never, and I mean, right now the makeup, as we'll talk about, I assume, is 201 to 199, Republican over Democrat. I have a 1-vote majority in the largest legislature, and guess what? We're going to get a ton of stuff done. I'm not even worried about that. We got our Speaker of the House on the first vote. I remind Kevin of that all the time. Mr. Lucky 15. Kevin's a really good guy, and I think he's actually doing a good job. But our system is really about accessibility, so that's my approach. If you build relationships, you meet people on their terms and their grounds, on their issues, right? It's easy as a governor to go around and just, I'm talking about this today, and this is where you need to agree. People do that all the time, and it drives me crazy. It's, hey, what's happening? What is going on in your life? And people will say, well, my daughter is having trouble getting access to mental health services. My son is, gone through treatment and recovery with opioids 3 times now, and we live in the inner city of Manchester. No, we live out in the rural areas of the state. So you have to be able to let them come and giving your time, right? The quality time to your constituents, and sometimes it's in the cereal aisle at Market Basket, because I'm in the cereal aisle at Market Basket a lot, and people know that, aisle 3. You can find me there every Tuesday night. And so accessibility is really, I think, the keys to a lot of our success, and and that's very different from the U.S. Senate, where very little is accessible. They live in this bubble in Washington. It's a big freaking mess, and nothing really gets done. As a governor, you can get stuff done. I make a decision. Governors make decisions, 100 decisions a day sometimes. And they can actually have true impact change. They can redesign systems. They can really break down barriers. They're not there just to do policy and funding like the legislature does. That's really all they do, right? Congress, they do. We agree on a policy, and we agree on funding, and that's it. And then it's up to governors and mayors and kind of the executives at the local level to really create the systems to get better results. But you can't do that successfully, I don't think, if you don't have accessibility to the issues.
Dovetails into my next question. We all know there's this lack of civility in politics today, polarization. I know you've been thinking about it, you've been talking about it, and ways to address it, talk across difference. So could you sort of explain your approach, how you think about it, how you operate?
In terms of getting stuff done?
Yeah.
So I'll give you some examples, right? So I've been governor 4 terms, but I'm one of the only governors, me and Phil Scott in Vermont, we're the only governors that have to get elected every 2 years, right? So this idea that, you can't get anything done in 2 years, or when I hear people say, we didn't have enough time to get stuff done in 4 years, give me a break, right? I mean, you can get plenty done, and if you do it the right way and have the right approach. So one of the first things I do when I had a Democrat-led legislature and even a Republican-led legislature, I bring the Democrats in first, right? When I first get inaugurated, one of the first meetings I have is the 5, 6, 7 people that kind of lead the Democrat Party. What are your priorities? What do you guys want to do, right? And then, obviously, I propose a budget, and the legislature will go about their business. When it comes time to negotiate the bills, or really have that negotiation, and that will happen usually kind of May 15th to June 15th every year, because that's when the end of the legislative session's coming. Now I go into those negotiations, whether it's with Republicans or Democrats, and I already know their priorities. Even if these bills don't deal with those issues, right? I know some of these things they already want. And so with negotiation, it's as somebody who's kind of not the power player, but as the governor, the tip of the spear, if you will, I know how to give a little to get a lot. And the example I'm going to give is this. We were negotiating a budget with Democrat-led legislature, House and Senate, and I wanted my tax cuts. I always get my tax cuts. And we've never raised a tax, and we have no sales tax, and we have no income tax. But they were proposing tax increases. And I said, no way. We don't need it. We don't need the money. Like, we have surpluses every single year. We have enough money for these programs. And they said, no, you're never getting your tax cuts. We're never going to let you do it. Okay. So I brought them in. I said, you know what? I remember 3 months ago you talked about SNAP benefits. These are benefits that help really low-income families with food and insecurity and all these types of things. And I said, you guys really wanted an increase in SNAP benefits, and the Republicans will never let you increase that. It's already really high. And they said, you'd never do that. I said, sure I will. You want to increase SNAP benefits? Let's do it. They said, really? Yeah, sure. So we gave in a little on increasing SNAP benefits. And they walked out of my office. They were so excited, as they should be. And they got to go out and tout, hey, we got Sununu to increase SNAP benefits. They get to talk to a constituency, and they show that they fought and got something, and I got my tax cuts, right? Now, I didn't want to remind them that we have the lowest poverty rate in the country in New Hampshire. And so increasing SNAP benefits it doesn't matter. I mean, it's good for that population, but it's not some massive, hole in the budget, so to say, and it's not the giant financial burden that other states may have to carry. But they got their win, right? It's okay to give the other side a win. Find a way to give your opponents a win. And if you do that, everything starts coming together, because then they believe they can get another win the next time. And that's fine. Then you reassess their priorities, and it's okay to give, and I do that with Republicans as well. I have a strong, New Hampshire's we have as every state does now, a really hard block of, I wouldn't even call them conservative. I have conservatives, I have libertarians, I have anti-government. It is, talk about the rainbow of political insanity. Come to New Hampshire, right? That's what makes us so special. What makes it great. So even on the conservative Republican side, I have to know what are their priorities, right? And I got to be able to give a little to get a lot. And if you do that, and you're willing to give the other side a win, which nobody seems willing to do now. It's all about putting my stake in the ground, all or nothing, 100% or nothing. That's never going to get anything done. And that's why, we can talk about why that's happening. It's gerrymandering. It's really a function of that has happened over the last 20 years. Pushes people further into their base corners. It doesn't allow as many independents and as many flex seats to come up. So therefore, people are more afraid of being primaried by their own party than they are of losing an election to the opposing side. So what happens? You get, let's call it a moderate Republican or a moderate Democrat. They get elected in a very extreme district, a gerrymandered district. They're no longer worried about the opposing side. They're just worried about getting primaried. So they move their principles and their philosophies, which you should never do, by the way, but they move to protect themselves politically. And so now they become more ingrained. And where we used to have 150 independent seats in this country that would kind of go back and forth and were up for grabs, maybe we have 50 now. So that's at the heart of this problem. And unfortunately, that genie is out of the bottle. You can't undo, it's really almost impossible to undo gerrymandering, right? Because that's really where the districts are. It would take a lot of political courage in each of those states. I'm the only governor in the country that did not sign a redistricting bill in his state, because the Republicans wanted something that was, I think, just too gerrymandered. And we have 2 congressional districts, right? I said, look, you have one that you want to make very Democrat and one that you want to make very Republican. I'm a Republican. Why would I give a Democrat a job for life, right? And I had to get the concern. I think good candidates can win any district. That has been proven and shown. So why are we just going to give something up? Why are we going to drive something there just because we think we can win it? Which, by the way, given Republicans, we don't always put up the best candidate. I hope that's not like neither do Democrats either. But a good candidate, quality candidates matter. In a place like New Hampshire that is purple, we're not red and blue, we are purple for the most part. I think Republicans can win anywhere. And it's been shown Democrats can win anywhere. So that's it. That's a good system, right? You want them to have to fight the other side and earn those votes as much as possible. So we're kind of one of the few last bastions of, I think, opportunity for both political parties to have a voice. And they just, unfortunately, they could use a lot more of that in D.C. Sorry, I talk too much. Sorry. I'm number 7 of 8 kids. So if I ever stopped talking, no one ever paid attention to me for like weeks. So I tend to give long answers, and I apologize. That's my father's fault. So.
It's all right, Governor. I suffer from a similar issue. But you alluded to my next question earlier, and I'm excited to ask it. Despite continued polarization on the federal level, some have pegged the future of the Republican Party by the success of its effective class of governors. Do you think there is truth to this claim?
I think the future of America is in the effective class of governors, both Republican and Democrat. I believe that very strongly. We all get along. We do now, but didn't always work that way. But 50 governors, about half and half, a few more Republicans than Democrats, we're all friends. We all get along very, very well. And I can give you 100 different examples of that. But the reason is that governors are at the heart of what the Founding Fathers had in mind, federalism. And that's where I get so frustrated with Washington. Even Republicans are forgetting what federalism is and why it is so important, that the states come first. And in my mind, when the state comes first, now my job is to make sure the cities and towns come first, right? The government at, I don't want to say the lower level, but the more local level is the best government. It's the most efficient form of government. It's where you get the highest voter participation. But the more we go up here to Washington level politics and policy, it's with a much worse result, almost every single time. So governors also have to make these decisions every single day. we have to design systems. We have a mental health issue. Okay, let me talk to the mom that couldn't get the services. Let me talk to the individual that was in a rural area. Maybe someone didn't have the right phone number in a moment of crisis. Maybe they went to a hospital that didn't have the right services. Maybe their area, their county doesn't have enough what we call DRF beds, designated receiving facility beds for someone with an acute mental issue, right? So find out where the system breaks down. And I'm an engineer. I'm from the other side, down the river. I'm going to do my best. I said I wouldn't make fun of Harvard, and I'd do the Harvard MIT thing, but, I think we all get it. But I'm an engineer. I love redesigning systems. I love it. That's the exciting part, because I learned, as a lot of you have, you never design the system right the first time. That's okay. But so you always have to design some flexibility. You got to design a system that can be tinkered with. This idea, when Washington gets involved and they design something for 5 years, that you have to wait for 5 years to come out, and maybe you get a report a few years later where it might look at some data. By that time, the whole thing has failed 7 years too long. Whereas opposed to a system that says we have accountability, we have metrics we're going to try to, and standards we're going to try to meet, we have a way to measure results, and we also have a way to change that measurement or change the system. The opioid crisis is a great example. When I became governor, our system really hadn't been changed probably since the 80s. But holy cow, did the drug crisis, it was so different. How you treat for fentanyl addiction is very different than how you treat for alcoholism, how it detoxes, the access points that you have. The fact that most of those organizations are in cities as opposed to rural areas. Yet rural access to care is the key to all of this, to actually changing the tide. And so that's where I redesigned the system. Did people get upset? You bet. Holy cow. I had a lot of nonprofits freaking out. And nonprofits are wonderful. They are the heart of our system. But I said, guys, relax. It isn't that we're not giving you more money. In fact, we're going to put a lot more money in this. But if you keep putting more money in a system that isn't working, you're just pushing harder in the same direction. That's a failure. You're just going to fail bigger, harder, faster. So have the courage to say, whoa, let's put some more money, but let's redesign and rebuild. And we did that. I called it the doorway, and it was a whole different approach, because it not only did it deal with fentanyl and what was happening at that time, but it's able to adapt, which it is. There's a whole different thing with mixing drugs now. First, it was over-prescribing fentanyl. Now fentanyl is getting mixed with vape cartridges. It's getting mixed with marijuana. It's getting mixed with xylazine. Xylazine, I don't know if you've seen this, xylazine is pretty much impervious to Narcan. You can't be revived when you have fentanyl and xylazine overdose. Narcan is not going to do it. Narcan is caustic. It actually eats away at your skin. We're seeing this kind of mixture in New Hampshire now. We're trying to stay ahead of it, and we've designed a system to have that approach. The last thing I'm going to throw in there, and I could go on all day about the doorway system, but we no longer do treatment over here and then recovery, prevention, enforcement. Those all used to work in silos. But now I make sure that my law enforcement officers know exactly how prevention works, that the treatment world knows exactly what law enforcement is doing. Recovery world knows exactly how treatment and prevention is working. So not that they have to be experts in their field, but the left and the right hand have to know what's going on to make sure you're getting a balanced approach, an all-hands-on-deck approach. And by doing that, again, I think we were the only state during the pandemic in 20 and 21. We were at the tip of the spear, right? In terms of overdose deaths. We're the only state in the country, I think maybe it was South Dakota, but that's debatable, the only state in the country that didn't see a rise in overdose deaths. Well, it's ticking up again because of this new mixture. So our system is flexible. It's adapting to what's happening with the polydrugs that are out there and the resulting treatment. So you just need a system that can adapt. And the nonprofits are happy, they're getting more money and all that kind of stuff because we're getting the results. And they know if it's not working, we can pivot.
I want to talk 2024.
It comes right after 2023.
Exactly.
That's all you need to know.
You're on it. Want to get your view of the field, state of play. Feel free to break news.
Sure.
At any point in this answer.
Okay. So is that the general question?
Yes.
Sure. Okay. So the breaking news is I really don't think Joe Biden is going to be the nominee. And I mean that very seriously. Okay. I think there's a few different pathways where that doesn't happen, and we can talk about that. On the Republican side, I think what you see is what you have, and that's probably the field, and it's just depending on who finally gets in. I don't think there'll be many new names into that. You'll have Trump running in Trump, Pence, DeSantis, Nikki will run, Vivek. I haven't met him yet. He's one of the few that I don't know. He hasn't visited yet, so I haven't met him. But I invite them all to come visit. Whether I get in the race or not is a different story, and we can talk about that. But I'm a very open book. I tell everyone, you got to come to New Hampshire. And I will sit in my office, and I will tell you how to win this state. I'll tell you, because I want you people to do well here. I want them to engage in the right way, and that is person to person. If you're going to come on the stage and act like a rock star and it ain't going to fly. Trump could do that once he became president. That's different when you're the actual incumbent and you're president. You need security and all that. But people forget, former President Donald Trump, when he ran in 2016, was in people's living rooms. He was. In the very beginning, he was doing person-to-person stuff. And he has this, regardless of what you see on TV, he has this innate ability to walk into a coffee shop and make casual conversation and get people excited, make a little connection, and move on. And people go, okay, well, that was more real than was expected, right? The expectation is up here that he's this TV star and wasn't going to be able to talk to people, but he would do it. He would really work it. He's a great salesman, and we can talk about all that. But so the other candidates, that's why he did well in 2016. He didn't win the state. He won the state, obviously, in the primary. Barely lost to Clinton, I think by like 1,000 votes. He came closer than most other Republican candidates to winning the state because he did it right. And so that's the secret sauce. You've got to connect with people on their issues in their towns. That we're very engaged. We have some of the highest voter turnout, the most confidence in our system. This is not a state where you just come in, raise a bunch of money, and run a bunch of ads. Ask Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush is a great friend. He's wonderful. And he raised a ton of money, and that guy was spending money in 2016 so desperately. Just throwing money they were throwing money anywhere they could to get traction. But in some ways, the more money they threw out there, the more people went, he's not really connecting with us, right? He's just trying to kind of do it that way. So again, an example of a very good candidate that didn't really campaign the right way in New Hampshire. In Iowa, you got to go to 99 counties in Iowa. You got to shake hands. You got to talk to farmers. You got to talk to everybody on their issue and be able to just connect, have a cup of coffee, right? Talk about Iowa State and how they got robbed in the first round of the March Madness or something, right? Just be normal. Some candidates are really good at it. Some not so much. So that's really the state of play. Tim Scott, I think he's going to get into the race. He's having a little trouble. He's a great guy. Great guy, Tim. Who else am I forgetting? Give me a couple other names. Not Tim Pawlenty. Tim Pawlenty. We're going back to 2012 now. Pompeo. Thank you, Pompeo. Dad. Thanks, Dad. I knew I ran for something.
That's why you're here.
I had to throw. Thank God. Pompeo. I think he's gonna get in the race. 50-50 on that one. Yeah. Super smart guy. Not quite doesn't have the political chops 100%, but really smart guy. Youngkin, Glenn, love Glenn Youngkin. Again, great, smart guy. Glenn's 50-50 because he's got to get stuff done in Virginia, right? He just got elected, this great campaign, a lot of national notoriety, very smart, would make a great president, no doubt. But he's got to get stuff done in Virginia, so I think he has to figure out how that plays out. But I think Biden has made a horrendous mistake by trying to move the first in the nation primary is not moving for the Democrats, by the way. It's not. They're going to move it, but we are not. We're still having the primary. We don't. The state does not do what the Democrat Party says. Our primary will be likely the third week in January. What they'll do is say, oh, well, we're not going to seat your delegates. Who cares? Nobody cares about that. New Hampshire is about coming, working, getting all the media attention, all the name ID that you need, all the really political momentum that you need. And they've so Biden, by trying to move it to South Carolina, has opened up his political flank, as I call it. So anybody, especially if someone has a lot of money, maybe even a little name ID, would come to New Hampshire, get people excited, be on the ground, probably win that primary very, very strong. And then what, it goes to South Carolina? No, it doesn't. South Carolina doesn't have primaries for incumbents. They don't. In 2020, they didn't have a primary for Trump. They just said, you're the winner. The political elites, and are they going to have a primary? No, they're just going to say Joe Biden's the winner. So they're not going to, Joe Biden won't even be on the ground earning the votes, getting the media, all that kind of stuff. So then what you're going to have is some candidate potentially come through, win the New Hampshire primary, get all this attention in a party right now that is barely 50-50 whether they think Joe Biden should have a second term. So Democrats themselves are going to say, hey, we have another option here, right? We have maybe a younger candidate, a candidate with a little more energy, a little more drives with what we want to see. We're going to go with option B. Thank you for your service. And they're going to very politely push Biden right aside. He could have health issues. We just don't know what the health issue. It's not great as it is now, right? So you don't know where that's going to go in the next year. There's just so much to play out. before it's actually going to happen. That I think there's a couple avenues there where he's left a huge opportunity for him not to be the nominee.
That was going to be a brief. Joe Biden will not be.
Yeah. I'm going to put it at 50% chance he's not the nominee.
Okay.
I'll throw some names. J.B. Pritzker, right? Governor of Illinois. He's won his second term. He's got nothing to lose, infinite money. He's a billionaire. Could just come to New Hampshire, work the ground, and do very, very well there. You want to hear the name? I'll give you a headline.
Sure.
Mark Cuban. He's the Democrat Donald Trump, right? He's a bit bombastic. His personality's out there. Super successful businessman. Very politically active. Wants to get involved in politics. If he's looking for his next hobby, I don't know, right? Come to New Hampshire and work the ground there. He would do incredibly well. But he's got a little rough around the edges, but he's not, he doesn't have the Donald Trump style baggage. I think Democrats, especially young Democrats, would get very excited about a guy like that. And all of a sudden, he's got all the momentum, all the name ID, and nothing's going to necessarily stop that. And if he's going against Biden now, effectively one-on-one, he wins, right? So folks like that could decide to get in the race and just walk right through it.
Governor, we're going to switch gears a little bit here, but your state is characterized by 4 powerful words: live free or die. Can you share how you square this philosophy with federal policy making? And how do you view the tension between Washington and state government?
Yeah, there's no squaring live free or die with federal policy making. They don't get it, but they should. So live free or die is, again, I say it very strongly, it is not 4 words on a license plate. It isn't. I mean, it's a cool license plate, don't get me wrong. Live free or die is at the heart of what we are. It is about local government, local control, limited government, low taxes, individual responsibility. And I remind folks, those are things that most of us like, right? It actually fascinates me lately with this younger generation, and it's almost, I won't call it a fascination, but so many of them don't mind the idea of bigger government and more taxes and more control, right? But like you're young people, you're supposed to not want that, right? You're supposed to tell us that you're smart and independent and don't need government and the man looking over your shoulder and all that sort of thing, right? So it's a little weird when I see young people in the socialist movement say, yeah, more government's the answer. So live free or die is at the core of not just what I think independents and definitely Republicans can rally around, but even the Democrats. And so what happens by keeping it local? We have the most important political day of the year isn't November election day. It's not even the first in the nation primary. It just happened 2 weeks ago. Town meeting sounds corny, but it's the most powerful tool New Hampshire has. What happens at town meeting? I live in a tiny town, 1,500 people, but big towns do it too. You show up at town meeting with all your friends and neighbors, and you have it out on all the different pieces of the budget, all the different line items, what roads are going to get paved, what your curriculum in your school is, who your school board is going to be. That's how our schools are controlled. Like, I don't control the schools in the state. We don't control all the curriculum, but we control very little of the curriculum, almost none. It all happens locally. And so you and me, our neighbors, as neighbors, we'll have it out. And so we might disagree, you might win, I might win, we all vote right there. Everyone takes part. So what happens through town meeting? Very high voter participation. Very smart electorate. We learn to do things very collegially because I probably have to wait at the bus stop with my kids, with your kids tomorrow, right? We're going to see each other tomorrow morning. So if I sit there and tear you apart personally because we disagree on trash removal, it's going to be awkward for us and our kids. So there's a sense by keeping things local and community driven, we just get along better. We all do have a lot of fundamental interests that do align, and we know that. And so that's why New Hampshire is so purple. That's why we're so good at what we do. That's why the first in the nation primary can never be duplicated anywhere else, because we have these fundamentals that are all based in live free or die that do that. Now, federal government, no. It is big government. The federal government, for the most part, thinks that government is here to solve a problem. The government is not here to solve your problems. No, and I'm the governor, and I'm very clear about that. My job is to create as many doors of opportunity for you, your family, your kids, your business. As many doors, right? And then you do you. Live free or die. That's my thing. You do you. You pick which door is best for you. I'm not there to tell you what door to go through. I'm not there to give you the one set of pathway that must be the answer for you. And the fact that Washington sets the rules for 330 million people in 50 different states, they effectively try to reduce that competition that creates innovation, that allows states to compete, that is at the heart of what the Founding Fathers originally started with, this concept of federalism, which is a really, really good idea. As we say around here, Those founding fathers were wicked smart. They were. They had the right idea. But Washington gets very wrapped up in themselves, and they lose that sense of individual. They lose that sense, that idea that I'm the governor, but you, the voter, you're a lot smarter than I am. You know what your town needs more than I do, right? You know what your school needs more than I do. You know what roads need to be paved. And so my system says, you're smarter than I am on these issues, so I'm going to give you the money. I'm going to give you the regulatory control. I'm going to funnel it down the chain. And that's how we create efficiency. We were ranked today, I'm very proud, for the 7th year in a row, and I happen to be a governor for the last 7 years. What a coincidence. New Hampshire is ranked as, and this is, we have a lot of number one rankings, lowest poverty rate, most personal freedoms, most fiscally conservative governor and all that. The one I am most proud of, number one in the country, most efficient government. You get the best programs for the dollars we put into the system in New Hampshire. 7 years in a row, we're ranked number one. And so, to me, that's at the foundation of good government, right? It's efficient. It's accessible. And we do that by keeping it local. So that is the antithesis of the not that Washington can't. I get look. The military has to be run federally and all that, but you can balance budgets. But a lot of it relies on the opportunity to block grant. Big block balance budget. I don't know, come up with some tagline for that. Send the money. Send the regulations. Send the opportunity back to the states. Governors are smart. Republican, Democrat governors, we're all very smart. We know what our states need. We might have different political philosophies, but we know where the needs are. Trust the governors to know where the needs are, and trust the governors to send that opportunity to the cities and towns. Not one size fits all out of the feds. They just don't get it. And it's getting more like that, which allows, unfortunately, for more partisanship and less to actually get done.
I just have a brief...
Does this make sense? I don't know. It's my engineering
it makes very clear. I want to just do a quick follow-up on the New Hampshire primary. Has there been a response from the DNC to your stating that you will hold that primary date? Yeah,
it was kind of funny. So they said, New Hampshire, we want you and your legislature to pass something that says that you will be second. And I wrote I'm not going to use the word polite. I'm going to use the word cordial but firm and snarky with a little bit of New England sarcasm thrown in there, letter back to the DNC saying, go pound sand. You're crazy if you think. I dare you. Come and take it. And I really laid out laid it out to Biden as well, the horrible mistake he's made. He's just doing something. Why is he going to South Carolina? Because his buddies are there. It's literally a very blatant personal political payback to his friends that supported him and turned his nomination around. That's the worst reason to pick a state to have such political and electoral responsibility. Isn't that what we're all against? People using their power to benefit their friends? And they're going to do it in a way that is from South Carolina. They're not even going to hold this thing. You know what they said? South Carolina is more racially diverse. We have a more diverse voting base. They have barely 15% voter participation. What's the point of diversity if you don't encourage people to get out and vote? I have 50+% voter participation. Rich, poor, inner city, rural, black, white, doesn't matter what color. Everybody participates in New Hampshire. So this idea that it's a more racially diverse state, but we don't encourage them to vote. In fact, we're not even going to hold a primary. That's nuts, man. That's hypocrisy at its worst, right? So, yeah, I kind of sent a second letter. I wanted to do it in emojis. My staff wouldn't let me do that. I wanted to do some funny emojis back to them. But no, that was basically it. And by the way, the Democrat delegation in New Hampshire is fully with me, of course. They made a terrible pitch. It's a little bit, I don't want to say their fault, but they did not help the situation, obviously. So it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out. But we're going first, whether they like it or not. Sorry. So come enjoy the show. It's going to be a circus. It's the funnest circus in town. It's great.
Before Abby asks her last question, you can line up at 4 microphones if you'd like to ask a question, 2 on the floor, 2 in the loge boxes up there. Remember to end your question with a question.
Thank you. Governor, as a 19-year-old Republican sitting on this stage with you today.
You're 19?
I am 19.
Wow, okay.
I can't help but worry about the lack of constructive discourse across partisan lines in our government. From name-calling to open slander to outright refusal by politicians to engage in bipartisan discussion, I often hear my own peers question the efficacy of our government altogether. In your opinion, what will it take for the GOP to reconnect with younger voters, especially in the 2024 election cycle? And is there hope for meaningful progress on the issues that matter to us?
Yeah, so great question, because I'm incredibly passionate about this. I spent a lot of my time. The whole reason that people started warning, oh, is Sununu going to run for president, all that. So about a year ago, a little less than a year ago, I started spending a lot of time doing more media and things like that, because I think there's a lot of independents that we've got a great product. I think Republicans have an awesome product. I think we are just terrible at messaging. We're terrible at selling our product. And you could have the best pair of shoes in the world, but if you don't advertise it, no one wants to buy them, right? So what we've done is we've disenfranchised independent voters that used to be with us. We've disenfranchised younger voters. I talk to young Republicans that I'm like, boy, this kid's probably really conservative, and like he's barely a Republican anymore, or he's more independent-minded now. They're way into the Democrat Party because they just don't feel like this is a team they want to get on board with. So my message is, won't bore you with the math, but mathematically, the Republicans have to go back and really encourage Democrats from getting on board. And I sell this live free or die thing. I sell this whole, these core concept of what I think good conservatives love to hear about limited government, local control. It's your money, it's not our money. You need to come first. You do you. You should come first, not the government. And I'm telling that very strongly to all the young people in here. Stop believing that the government is there to create solutions for you. They don't care. Right? And you should be strong in voice and say, look, I'm an individual. I should come first, because you do come first. And I think that's a very powerful message. We just don't deliver it very well. So I've been spending a lot of time doing that. I tend to be more smiley. I don't know. It's a simple way of saying it. I try not to get overly agitated. Does anyone get inspired by getting yelled at? It drives me crazy. I see my peers on media screaming, oh, rah, rah, rah. I'm like, well, you didn't earn any votes there. You didn't, let's be a team here. So whether it's me or someone else, I want the Republicans to win in November of 24. I believe that it's that important for our country. So I think not just myself, but there's other leaders out there that are trying to bring the discourse down and the ability to kind of sell our product a little better. I wish I was seeing it a little different out of some of the leading presidential candidates, because it all starts with leadership. If the president, and let's go there, or the governor of the state or the president is doing right by it, the system works. The system is not broken. The gerrymandering is a bit broken. That's a tough one. But beyond that, think of 435 members of Congress. The vast majority want to get stuff done. There's no question. The vast majority of Democrats are really, really good people. The vast majority of Republicans are really, really good people. We hear the 20 or 30 on one side over here and the 20 or 30 on one side over here, that again, the media, and we have as well, handed our microphones to the extremes, and they effectively define us. But look, 80% of us, of Americans, are in here, right? We disagree politically, but we just want to get stuff done. We want to have good discourse. But if it comes from the top, it will work. Why did Biden win? He didn't win because he was the best Democrat. He did. He won because, first, he was the most moderate Democrat there was. And what the Democrats were saying is, we don't want this extreme socialist AOC extremism. That ain't us. We're going to vote for this guy. He has experience getting in the Senate. He has experience working. He knows some of these Republicans, so he'll be able to easily build relationships. And then why did he win in November? Exact same thing. Independents in America said, we want the guy that has the best chance of not being bombastic and not being extreme. Unfortunately, he's become obviously very, very extreme, much more extreme than he catered himself in previous years. And there's a reason for that. That's more staff-driven than anything, and I think he doesn't completely get just how far left he's gone. And that's why even half of the Democrats are like, we're moving on. I say this, what is the Democrat elite in Washington, D.C. say behind Joe Biden's back? Exactly what they said to his face on the debate stage, that he was an old, out-of-touch white guy that did not represent the future of the Democrat Party, right? So the Democrat elite there do have very little respect for him. But we as Americans, the 80% of us, I didn't vote for him, but America as a whole voted and gave him the win because we thought he'd be a little more moderate and a little more temperate in the approach, and it just really hasn't panned out. But it can get there, and I think most Americans get it. So it doesn't always show itself in the nomination process and the primaries. I think both sides tend to elect pretty bad candidates. I think the Democrats nominated a horrible candidate in 2016 in Hillary Clinton. Nobody believed in Hillary Clinton. It was, even the Democrats that voted for her were doing it, do we really have to? And then the same thing happened in 2020 and in 2022, right, in our Senate races. Republicans should have 54 Senate seats right now, but we nominated really bad candidates. What scares me is that we seem to have already forgotten that. We talked about it for 2 months, and then all of a sudden, we're talking about more extreme candidates that just cater to the base again. But leadership can get it done. And leadership that says, hey, the other side, you guys have a voice. What wins can I get you? I'm going to fight for my wins here, but I'm more than happy to give your wins. The big example is immigration reform. That's the big misstep. Sorry, we haven't talked too much policy, and I'll go quick, but if you take the U.S. Senate, let's just focus on the Senate. There are 10 Democrat and 10 Republican senators that really agree on a lot of immigration reform. But a lot of folks have said, on immigration, we're not going to look at naturalization issues until you secure our wall. And then after we do, the immigration reform, then we'll talk about DACA. And after we do DACA, then we'll do this. No, stop. Put it all on the table, right? I want a secure border. I want a big open door so the best and the brightest can come into this country. That would be great. But you got to have a secure border to do that. Let's acknowledge that. And then we can talk, we're not going to export 20 million, deport 20 million people, right? So let's talk about DACA and how we get there, from here to there, because that has to happen. Put it all on the table at once. I'll give you your wins, you give me my wins, and America as a whole will say, thank you for showing us that you can get something done. It's actually not that hard. I do it all the time. Even though New Hampshire's a small state, the politics are just as challenging, and I have tighter numbers, and I still get stuff done. So there's a huge opportunity there, and so the Senate can show some of that leadership too. We're not quite there yet, but hopefully they'll come around.
Great. Let's get started. If you could say your name and affiliation, that would be great. We'll start over here.
Hi, Governor.
Hi.
Thanks so much for being here. My name is Jack, and I'm a sophomore at the college. You seem to be advancing kind of an ideology of voter participation, increasing engagement with government, whether it's in New Hampshire or at the national level. In 2024, whether you or someone else is the Republican candidate for president, how do you think they'll reconcile that with kind of the advancing Republican agenda at the state level of prioritizing election security with measures that many would say decrease voter participation?
Sure. So, let's just speak for New Hampshire. We got a great system in New Hampshire. It works amazingly well. When you poll the New Hampshire citizens, it's like 98% or 99% integrity in the system, in the electoral system. They know that their vote counts and it works. Nationally, I'll say this, nationally every state's different, right? And it's okay that every state's a little bit different because those dynamics are different. You should never let the federal government tell your state how to run an election. Right? That's really clear. I think ballot harvesting is unethical. I think it's horrible, but you can legally ballot harvest in certain states, California for one, right? And so I see Republicans saying, these guys are ballot harvesting in California. Yeah, the law allows that. I don't agree with it, but you better play by those rules or you're going to keep getting your butt kicked, right? So my big message is, look, if you want to change the law in your state around elections and election integrity and all that sort of thing, go for it. You make the change. But then understand those are the rules and play by them. Stop telling your voters, I don't believe in voting early. I think Pennsylvania is a good example of that, right? Hundreds of thousands of ballots were cast in Pennsylvania before the debate even happened. And then the debate happened and a lot of people went, ugh, maybe Fetterman's not the guy, but it was too late. They had cast their vote way before a lot of the real decision-making, a lot of the back and forth was really willing to happen. They were casting their vote based on what they saw on television as opposed to two candidates really talking about issues. But that's the rules. So when I hear people say, well, don't vote early, to Republicans, don't vote early. Well, if the state allows voting early and you want to vote early, tell people to go vote early if it gets people out, right? So, nationally, I think certain states have certain issues that they're working out. I think Arizona has actually worked a lot of their issues out. They count too slow for my liking and for a lot of people's liking, but they counted really slow to ensure, with people in the room, to ensure they got that vote right in November of 22. And of course, you heard Kerry Lake and some people saying, oh, well, it must be that it's a rigged system. No, it's not. There's actually no proof of that. You had people in those rooms too. So there are ways to show transparency in that system, and states are slowly getting there. Now, every state is different, so you got to play by those rules, but I think our rules in New Hampshire are fantastic. And we have some of the we have voter ID. Show me an ID to vote. And people say, well, that's going to decrease voter participation. Well, I have like the highest voter participation in the country, so obviously that's not true, right? So allowing the process to take place and letting the voters there decide what that system should be, that's the way to do it. Does that help? I don't know if I answered that clearly. Thank you.
How are you, Governor? Thank you so much for speaking, Governor. Both governors, Abby, thank you. My name is Michael Oved. I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on national Republicans. Clearly, a lot of national Republicans haven't taken the same approach that you have, that live free or die mentality, the same approach that our founders did, that of letting the states decide what to do. So my first question is, why is that? And the second connected to that is, how can we go back to that era of Republicans that believed more in states' rights over federal government?
So I'll throw a couple real things at you. Term limits. I'm a huge believer in term limits, right? This idea that you have senators that are there for 4 or 5 terms. I mean, not only is it just reduced turnover that should happen naturally, if you had term limits, you would always have a good batch of senators on both sides of the aisle that really had no political gain in doing anything other than just getting stuff done, right? And so it takes money out of the equation and all that. The system isn't corrupt, and these people, they're not corrupt, but we've also allowed a system where headlines and being extreme and getting those headlines can raise you a lot of money. It's not illegal, that's the system. I think you need massive campaign finance reform. I have a little old New Hampshire, right? I hate that all of this dark money comes into a state like New Hampshire. But nobody raises it much money in New Hampshire, right? A presidential candidate comes in New Hampshire, they're not saying, hey, you should go to my website and give me money, because we just laugh at them, right? No, you have to earn the right to come into my living room. Maybe I'll let you in, Joe Biden, right? Or maybe I'll let you in, Donald Trump, to talk to my friends and family. And it ain't about money. It's just about connection. But campaign finance reform, I think, would be huge. McCain-Feingold, it's really made the system worse. It wasn't intended to do that, but the unintended consequences of all this dark money. And I personally, maybe people will disagree, I don't buy the argument that, look, corporations can give as much money they want to this advocacy stuff because of First Amendment rights and freedom of speech. I get all that. But there has to be some sort of limits so that the massive amount of money that comes into play. Why were those folks holding up the election of Kevin McCarthy? It wasn't because they disagreed with Kevin McCarthy. They knew he was going to be speaker. But every time they held up their vote, they literally sent fundraising emails, right? And they were making millions into their campaign accounts and their advocacy groups. So they basically did that to be a show, to raise a lot of money with an extreme base on it, and the other side does it as well. So campaign finance, term limits, things like that can start bringing a little more accountability into the system, as opposed to this kind of rock-solid thing where money is driving a lot of things. And that's just unfortunate. You need money in campaigns. There's nothing wrong with raising money in a campaign, right? So go ask folks and meet your campaign limits and go earn it. Raising money raises votes. When I go out and ask somebody to give me $5 to my campaign, if someone gives me $5, that is huge, because they probably don't have a ton of money. And if they're making an investment in me and my campaign, or even my opponents, then they're probably going to go tell their friends and family, that to back the investment. Oh, be sure to vote for Sununu, right? That's okay. And you've connected with them, and they've given you the $5, and you've earned that vote, and hopefully some as well. When you just self-fund, I mean, I'm not saying you shouldn't make that illegal, but self-funding campaigns is the worst thing you can do. How many millionaires self-fund things and they go nowhere because they don't feel like they have to earn it. They don't have to go connect with people. But getting somebody to give a couple bucks to your campaign is a powerful thing. All the dark money and the unlimited checks that come in, that really skews things a little bit, and it unfortunately drives a little more partisanship than's needed. But it can be fixed. It really can.
Great. Go up there.
Governor.
Hi.
Hi, hello. My name is Ben Bolger. I'm a teaching fellow at Harvard.
Sure.
And we're in a great institution, the Kennedy School of Government, and there's many great theoretical and practical lessons learned here. But your father, I'm sure, with his Washington experience and experience as governor, had unusual insight, and I'm sure he passed that down to you when he was mentoring you. What are some key advices that you received from him that we might not get at a great institution like this? What's some real-world advice that you got as a young boy?
Well, not real world. Let's
influenced
go
you?
back to the first word you used, which was unusual. Unusual insight. So I become governor, and obviously when your dad is governor in the 80s, the first thing you think and you hear is you're just going to be in a shadow. Right? My dad was a great governor. He was phenomenal in the 80s. I'll explain what the 80s is later for those who aren't familiar with that term. But yeah, so I'm like, oh man, you're gonna be shut. But my dad gave me one piece of advice which was great. He said, don't give unsolicited advice, because it's rarely taken, right? And so he was actually quite brilliant. It was I don't know if you intentionally did this or not. It was a great a psychological move. He said, I'm not going to call you. I'm not going to bug you. I'm not going to tell you what to do. Just, you've earned this. Go do it. You know the dynamics of the state. You see what's out there. You're a business guy. You're an engineer. You got the tools. Go earn it. I'm not going to, and he didn't. He didn't pick up the phone. He wasn't giving me advice on a day-to-day basis. But he knew that I'd come crawling and be like, hey, by the way. And so I'd pick up the phone to him, right? So it kind of had a double effect. But so I say all the time, and it's really true. My father is really brilliant, obviously, and I would never say he's a Mensa guy, because he's too smart for Mensa, as he reminds everybody. And he knows how to use a slide rule. But we were just coming down here working on an op-ed. I'm doing an op-ed for the Wall Street Journal, and he's brilliant at, even though he's an engineer, at saying, hey, you use 6 words here, and they're way too big. Use 3 words. Keep it simple, right? Just use 3 words. Say what you need to say. You don't need to impress anybody with your big vocabulary, and I don't have a big vocabulary, by the way. But he's great at simplifying things, keeping it right to the point, doing it in a cordial manner, and being able to talk to someone about an issue, a very complex issue, in a very simple way. And I've tried my best to learn from that. And I try my best not to give unsolicited advice because nobody ever takes it. And sometimes I'll say, hey, Pop, there's a new issue, it's coming up, it's X, Y, and Z, what do you think? And he'll give me an answer that was phenomenal in 1987. So I have to be like, okay, well, we're not going to use those words, and we're not going to do that because that doesn't even exist anymore. I won't tell him that. So I kind of take that answer and say, oh, I get what he was trying to do. How do I turn that to 2023, right? An opportunity for 2023. So it's not quite, well, no, it is that antiquated sometimes. And sometimes he gives me advice, and I'm like, I can't do it. I'm not there. Right? We disagree politically on, I wouldn't say a lot. I'm more socially moderate than my dad is, and that's okay. So he gives me, you should go here. What do you think of this? And maybe there's a path there. But at the end of the day, I got to stay true to myself, And but no, he's great at allowing me and encouraging me, and the value of my time. That's the other thing he said. There's nothing more valuable as a governor or a leader of your business. When I ran a business, I spent time with my customers and my employees. When I was an engineer, I probably spent time, with my calculator a lot, but out in the field trying to figure out what the problem was. And as a governor, spending time with my constituents, just the value of quality listening time. And you have to find what's your thing. My thing is the grocery store. Everyone knows, come to Epping, exit 7, you're going to find Sununu at Market Basket, like 3 times a week. And I make the joke about the cereal aisle, but it's really true. The cereal aisle is, you guys, anyone who shops for cereal, I have kids, I never know what they want to buy, and it's the one aisle in the store where they move stuff way too much. So I'm always standing there like, and sure enough, someone will come up and be like, hey, Gov, I don't mean to bug you, but I got a question. Sure, what do you need? And I can really talk and chat and let them talk. And then I can figure it out. I take their phone number, or maybe I give them my cell, and we try to figure it out. We connect constituent service, right? Constituent service is everything. So there's my 2 cents of his 10 cents of advice.
Great. Over there.
Thank you, Governor Sununu. Beautiful presentation. I'm Gabriel Kelvin. I'm a master's in public policy student here and also the chair of the Republican caucus, one of the co-chairs for HKS. So something you were talking about was limited government. And as students of government, oftentimes our default is to go to more government, more programs, more regulation is the answer to address social problems. Can you give us an example or speak more to government by subtraction?
Great. Oh boy, that is an awesome question. And congratulations for having a Republican caucus in Harvard. Is there more than one of you? No, I'm just kidding. That was a joke. I know there's a lot. Better government by, let me give you a real example. Mental health will be a little overly complicated. Education. So I could sit in Concord and we could pass laws that say the curriculum must be X, the curriculum must be Y and Z. But by, again, saying we're not going to do that here, we'll let the locals do it. Do I agree with what every school board does? Hell no. Very liberal towns in New Hampshire. But is it my job to then go correct them? If I start doing that, guess what? The next Democrat governor is going to do the same thing to the conservative towns. If I penalize someone because I don't agree with a curriculum stance, I don't agree with the teacher's contract, those are all done locally too, right? So by saying we're going to take hands off, the whole system works better. We have some of the best schools in the country, as do you. Massachusetts is really probably the best public school system in the country over the last 10 years. New Hampshire is probably the top 4 or 5. The money stays local. The taxpayers, the property taxes are what fund the schools locally. And so they have all the power. So that's the quick answer of, the discipline of not doing more even though you want to fix the problem. I want to fix Lebanon, right? Yeah. She came from Lebanon, New Hampshire. Just left of AOC, right? Very liberal town, very left-wing town. But they drive me crazy sometimes with what they do. But you know what? If they're not doing a good job, their citizens will fire them. But the citizens obviously like what they're doing. So is it my job to step all over that? No, it's not. So overall, the system maintains its integrity by the discipline of doing less out of Concord.
Thank you.
Great. Go down here.
Good evening, sir.
Hey.
My name is Matt Kennedy, and I'm a former National Security Fellow here at the Kennedy School and a longtime Army officer, and I'm also from Londonderry, New Hampshire. And we're having a challenge in the Army right now in terms of recruiting young people into the military, and I was wondering what your thoughts were to inspire young people to join the service as well as join government in the current day.
Sure. So, well, let's start with joining government. Public service is great. Anyone who wants to run for office, I always kind of tease political science majors, probably not the right room to do that in, but the best, you will make a better elected official if you have a real job first, to be blunt about it. You have to learn teamwork. You have to be in the private sector. I had to learn how to sweat out. I ran my own business. I had shareholders that expected a return. I had 800 employees that I needed to make payroll for, and I ran a ski resort, which is, again, wicked hot. And that was hard, and I had to go through some really tough times, but I learned so much in that. And just those soft skills of team building and all that, and it isn't just my policy, my way every time. You have to learn how to do that in a private sector setting. So I'm strongly encourage anybody who's really interested in politics and service to find your thing first. Get those skills before you jump in and run for office. In service, so a couple things. There's no doubt a really hard recruiting. My son is right now considering joining the Marines, which I'm very excited about. I get frustrated when I see political leaders not understand that America is the world leader, and we provide peace through strength. And there's something amazing about that. And there's something inspiring. And I don't think we do the inspiring talk of it's not just what service is and just to your country, but what service is in terms of the responsibility to creating peace in the world. I believe very strongly in that. Now, I will say this. I think the military system of recruitment is screwed up. And I'll explain why. If you took Adderall at 12 years old because you had ADHD or whatever, maybe you took it for a couple months, that is actually grounds for not serving. The slightest thing can be grounds for you not serving. There are so many disqualifiers that knock kids out of service where now they won't even think about participating because, well, it's a mental health issue. Couple things. First off, understand that young people are dealing with a bigger mental health crisis than we ever have before. And young people that, I'm not saying if you take Adderall it should be nothing, but I'm saying young people that have seen a doctor, that have gone through mental health services, that have learned how to cope with issues, I would challenge you that they are have more tools in the toolbox to be great with service, to handle stressful situations, to know how to cope with the mental health issues. The fact that we only take people into service that have never dealt with mental health issues, and then we have all these folks that come out of service with, the high suicide rates. They don't have the tools to know how to do that. So I just think I'm not saying it's an absolute, but a lot of those metrics that are traditionally used in military service to disqualify folks need to be reassessed and readjusted. I know a lot of great kids that I've written recommendation letters for to go to academies or whatever that have come back to me and say, I can't serve. And I'm like, why? And they tell me why. And it's the most ridiculous reason in the world. So I think it has to happen on both ends. But America's service members create peace in this planet. There's no doubt about it. It's why I'm so adamant that we back Ukraine, right? We don't need to even put troops on the ground. But showing our strength creates peace. Showing weakness or leading from behind or being tepid about what we're going to do. We are the world leaders. Act like it. And with our service members isn't just this dictatorial army that goes through and nation builds. That's not what this is about. It's about providing peace and security, making sure our enemies know that we have resolve, and making sure our coalitions and our allies know they can count on us. And that provides world peace and stability in itself. Doesn't mean there won't be conflicts here and there, but they're more likely to spur up. Yes, that was a piece of advice my father gave me on the way down. But that's really, I believe that very strongly. And hopefully we can inspire. Service is amazing. Yeah. I never served. We're not really from a military family. But I'm now the head of the National Guard. I have Guard troops that I have to deploy. It's a hard decision telling my Guard, 150 of you are going to go away for a year and serve in the Middle East in this deployment. That's hard. It's time away from their families and a huge sacrifice. I see it. But man, those families, they're so sad to see their loved ones go, but they're so proud. None of them regret it at all. They're so proud to do it. And they understand the value of what comes to the table with it. So. What else we got?
Well, we've come to the top of the hour. Governor, thank you so much for being with us this evening.
That was quick.
It goes by fast.
I talk too much, I know.
It goes
Sorry.
by fast. Abby,
Well, I hope
thank
it
you
was
so
fun.
much for your moderation.
I don't
Thank you all
think we
for
made
coming.
any headlines, though. I promised some headlines.
Well, you may have made.
I didn't use any bad words. I tend to do that a little bit, and I'm trying to get better about it. So. Well, look, this was a heck of a lot of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. I appreciate it. This was great. Thank you. Thank you so much.